The book begins with a guy who is all haggard and defeated, facing a great demon. It is explained that, in this world, God is dead. Humanity worships gold and reveres arcane engineering until, in the end, they turn themselves into slaves. The protagonist then wonders how this is fair, while the demon draws his sword. Turning on the demon, he wonders how this makes sense. With all his might, he attacks the demon, and a huge explosion occurs. It is explained that this is the best modern apocalypse game there is, called Arcane Seoul. The scene changes, and we see the real protagonist cursing on his cell phone, saying that this game is pay to win. His name is Kim Joonsoo, a 22-year-old high school student. His character in the game is dying, and he wonders how this is fair. The demon, in turn, comments that players who don't pay anything in the game are ridiculous. In fact, that demon was another player who was in automatic mode the whole time. He says it's very amusing to see this kind of poor player. Meanwhile, in reality, the protagonist is furious, cursing the other player. Suddenly, Kim screams in the middle of the street, saying that after 10,000 hours of playing, he still can't kill even one person. That's because the game is literally just a filthy gacha, and he regrets wasting his time. He decides that he'll just do his daily chores in the game and then go to work, but decides to give the gacha one more try. He thinks he's going to get one of the worst characters, Warrior Kim, but when he takes the shot, he's shocked. A platinum chest appears. Inside, we see that celestial demon he was facing earlier. He's an SSR rank character. Kim is shocked to finally get a decent character, the celestial demon. He celebrates by saying that he now has a real character in the game, and that the chances of him getting it for free were 0.006%. He's very happy, saying that he's finally got the celestial demon, and that he's going to sacrifice all the other useless characters to evolve his new character, without any remorse. Kim takes all the Kim's warriors to evolve the celestial demon. We see that the celestial demon is nourished by the souls of these sacrificed warriors. The protagonist says goodbye to all the Kim's warriors, as he is now the owner of a celestial demon. Suddenly, an out-of-control truck is coming towards him, and he thinks he's seen this scene before. When he wakes up, he's in a hospital bed. He wonders what happened and why he's there, until he gets a massive headache and remembers. The truck was coming towards him, but he managed to swerve a little. However, he was hit by it. Luckily, it wasn't fatal. Otherwise, he wouldn't be there, right? A nurse approaches him, calling him Warrior Kim, and asks if he's finally awake. She says she'll call the doctor. The protagonist is confused, wondering why they're calling him Kim Warrior. Then he sees his file, Kim Warrior, 22 years old. He suffered a concussion to the head as a result of the accident and thinks, wait a minute, is my name really spelled Kim Warrior? It must be a mistake, right? At this point, he begins to feel a little guilty for having used all those Kim Warriors to evolve the celestial demon, but it still doesn't make sense that they're calling him the Kim Warrior. When he tries to stand up, he feels excruciating pain in his casted leg and starts screaming. The nurse tells him that he can't move because his leg is fractured. Then the doctor arrives and confirms that he was hit by a truck, narrowly escaped, but they still need to do some tests. He mentions the need for a magical energy test, and the protagonist wonders, magical energy? Kim Warrior? What are they talking about? In the next scene, we see a receptionist accounting for all the services, emergency, rooms, beds, and exams. In the end, the total amount is $22,375.69. Kim is perplexed. What? I was here for 4 days and it cost $22 million. The receptionist explains that he has no insurance. He asks how he doesn't have medical insurance since everyone in Korea has it. The woman replies that he doesn't have Magic Tower insurance. Kim asks, Magic Tower? Wait a minute. He starts to remember the terms. Magic Tower Legion, Divine Order. These are the 4 factions that dominate the Arcane Seoul game. It seems that he has been transported into the game. It is explained that, in the game, God abandoned humanity. Arcane technology was drastically developed, but the Earth became polluted and full of monsters. In order to survive, humans have modified their own bodies. The protagonist, however, only thinks about how difficult this world is to survive in. He remembers that he went to sleep very happy to have gotten the heavenly demon, but now he's become a tutorial character. Maybe it's divine punishment for having sacrificed all those Kim's warriors. Arriving at the hospital room, he reflects that it's even smaller than his old apartment. Why is Warrior Kim so poor? And he says that his body isn't right either. He's not even in the mood to think about that kind of thing right now. He keeps thinking about what he's going to do, and if this really is Arcane Seoul, soon there will be nuclear wars, dimensional rifts, and ancient gods will revive in this world, literally turning it into hell. He has no idea how he got there, but if he keeps going, he'll die 100%. At the same time, that means something else. Suddenly, he picks up a pen, sticks the end out and says he needs to check this before it's too late. He simply stabs his own hand with the end of the pen. He feels a lot of pain and a lot of blood comes out, but suddenly the wound starts to heal until it closes completely. He comments that he knew it would work, and the system tells him that he's just got a new trait, wound recovery. He explains that this is why he has evolved the Kim Warriors so much. The Kim Warrior is a character you get for free in the tutorial, but it's the only character that has a basic trait. However, you can unlock other traits and swap them around, allowing you to create your Kim Warrior with more freedom than any other character. For someone like the protagonist, who relied on strategy, Kim Warriors were better than the rarer characters. This means that since he is a Kim Warrior, he can acquire any trait he wants, as long as he works for it. At that moment, he got the enhanced recovery trait. In this world, it's explained that you die if you're poor, weak, or unlucky, but the protagonist won't let that happen to him. He will survive at any cost. With 10,000 hours of gameplay, he knows what needs to be done. Even better, he's in the body of a Kim Warrior. In the next scene, he's at a players' association to register. A man is looking at his CV, or form, and asks if it's his first time in a player's office. He replies that it is, and that he wants to join the mana purification business. Thinking to himself, he reflects that he needs money, since in a world like this, without money, he won't get very far. However, he's still in a weak body, so he won't be earning much just yet. The man, who is the personnel director, Joonsoo, explains that the job is mana purification, but asks if the protagonist knows what dungeon cleaning means. The protagonist replies that yes, he is aware of everything. Joonsoo mentions that there isn't much in his file, but the protagonist thinks that, of course, he knows how boring this job is. Then a little is explained about the contaminated mana, which is why the monsters have taken over Arcane Seoul. Clearing a dungeon, in a nutshell, is eliminating the garbage that attracts this contaminated mana. However, being exposed to this mana for too long can lead to death. In this scene, we see a person being corrupted by this mana, becoming something demonic. This is known as mutation, a risk of this type of work, which makes it extremely dangerous. Joonsoo says that as soon as they put together a team for him, the protagonist will be sent on his first mission. He asks again if the protagonist is sure he wants to do this, because people who have gone in just for the money have come out worse than dead. The protagonist replies that Choi doesn't need to worry, and jokes that he knows so much about this job that he could take over as director. With a maniacal grin, he thinks that working with this kind of thing, being free to play, is his specialty. After all, he has 10,000 hours of gameplay. In the next scene, we see the team leader, Servo, who thinks there's a newcomer on the team. The protagonist comments that yes, he was assigned to this team without much choice. Servo grabs the protagonist by the collar and asks him if he thinks this is a playground, demanding to see determination in his eyes. Servo warns him that if he sees any trace of mutation in the protagonist, he will kill him without mercy. The protagonist thinks, trying to scare the newbie, it seems that this exists in real life as well as in the game, doesn't it? He also notes that Servo is a rank R character, and it seems that he hasn't evolved yet, because he doesn't have the legs of steel. Then someone else arrives, saying that there's no need to frighten the newcomer, and that person is the Hedgehog, who has 5 years experience. He explains that everyone there works for the same office, so there's no need for conflict. Servo replies that he was just checking that the protagonist was really going to help them on the mission, and that he would be very happy if he wasn't a problem. Ignoring the protagonist, Servo goes to talk to the rest of the team, saying that they need to finish the job quickly. The protagonist is obviously annoyed, because there were people like that in the game too, but Hedgehog, being kind, tells him not to get upset. According to him, Servo may be tough, but deep down, he's a nice guy. The protagonist is even impressed that someone is being polite to him. In the next scene, we see the disgusting gates of the dungeon, before which the team stands. Everyone smells the horrible odor of rotting flesh and corpses. Servo announces that he's going to open the doors and asks everyone to get ready. It seems that he uses a card to access the place, but at that moment, something splashes towards them, and Servo tells everyone to get into position. Here's the text with the corrected punctuation. We can see that these slimes that have been splattered on the ground have turned into something like slimes. These low-ranking creatures are contaminated slimes. Proto reflects that the basis of cleaning up contaminated mana is to do it properly and kill the creatures that are also contaminated by it. They may be easy to deal with in combat, but every creature has its strengths. We see a guy hitting the slime on the head with a shovel, but it splits in two and goes either way. Proto thinks that, because they're made of contaminated mana, they'll only die if they break the cores inside them. Everyone gets desperate, telling them to find the cores soon. because otherwise these bugs won't die. Prota rushes off knowing what to do and warns the bloodthirsty guy in front of him that if he doesn't get out of the way, he won't take responsibility for what happens. He pierces the slime with all his might, finding the core and shattering it completely. He says it was perfect and asks the terrified guy over there if that wasn't a good warm-up. After that, Prota goes around killing all the slimes in his path with the shovel, hitting the core every time. He clears all the slimes by himself, and the people are impressed as he kills all the slimes with one blow. While everyone is impressed, Prota is already going after the big slime. He thinks it would be possible to do this. But we see a flashback to 2 days ago. Our Prota was crouching down, looking for something on the ground in a children's playground. A child's grandmother says, "Don't stare at him, he must be sick." Only he was looking for something specific until he finally found a 500 coin. That's when he gets a new trait, Treasure Hunter. He thinks he's finally got the most important trait for a Kim warrior. While he was all happy with the coin, the grandmother was blocking the child's view so that he wouldn't see the weirdo. Prota says that before he was there in the present, he had prepared himself and obtained all the necessary traits. In the next scene, we see him face down in a dumpster, all nauseous, until he finally vomits in there, and the system tells him that he has achieved the contamination resistance trait. He thinks this is the hardest trait to get. This explains that he has obtained all the traits needed for a Kim warrior before doing any missions. He sees his system full of traits that he obtained with sweat and blood. In the end, he had 6 traits, and since he's a Kim warrior, he can switch between them. The system says that the Treasure Hunter trait can find the opponent's weakness. Thanks to this, he can see all the mana cores. He was then killing the huge slime. However, the slime explodes and falls on the staff. All smeared with slime, with that maniacal look on his face, Prota says that his hard work is paying off. Warrior Kim's special work is incredible. Even covered in slime, he's unaffected because he's resistant to contamination. In the next scene, at night, we see Prota inside a vehicle after the mission has been completed. He says that, even with all the traces, he ended the day very tired. The hedgehog appears, saying that they're going home early thanks to Prota. He says that Prota is incredible, asks how he did all that, and if he's an awakened one, like the servant. Prota replies that no, he just has a lot of military experience. The guy says that if that's the case, he's incredible. Suddenly 2 horns grow on the hedgehog's head, and Prota realizes that his mutation is getting worse. It seems he's being exposed to too much contaminated mana. Prota asks Hedgehog if it wouldn't be better if he rested, but Hedgehog replies that he'd rather become a mutant than face his debt collectors. Prota remembers why so many people do this kind of work. 4 days later, we see that they have finally finished packing up all the contaminated waste. Prota thinks that everyone is exhausted from 4 days of killing monsters and cleaning up garbage. However, it's Hedgehog who's the worst off. Prota thinks he's been warned not to work so hard. The servant appears in front of Prota and says that he is in one piece, probably because he is young. He praises Prota, saying that he has done a great job. Prota is happy, saying that he's there to do his job. He thinks that, thanks to the strokes he got from killing the creatures, the job has become much easier. He also reflects that the servant has held his own, perhaps because he's an R rank. However, we see that the hedgehog is transforming because of the contaminated mana. The staff ask if he's alright, but the servant jumps in, asking what's going on. Prota realizes that the transformation is really happening. The servant tries to get the hedgehog to wake up, but it doesn't work. He was already transformed, and suddenly a huge explosion happens. Prota thinks this is a big problem. We see that the hedgehog is now huge. He's become a mutant. Prota thinks he's lost all his sanity, but he can't defeat this mutant now. He just needs to run. He reflects that all the traits he got were to help him at work, but none are for combat. No matter how much he thinks about getting out of this situation, he knows he's in deep trouble. The mutant slaps him in the face and throws him away. He rolls around in the dirt, spits up a lot of blood, and thinks that the difference in power is gigantic. However, after this beating, he gains another trait, endurance. He thinks that although he has many traits, not all of them useful for combat, he can't give up. He needs to do something to survive, but he also needs space. He decides to delete some traits and keep only those that will be useful now. Strength, which will be very useful, mana heart, which will help in combat, and endurance, which will reduce damage. Mana absorption and deep breathing keep your mana high. The final piece of the puzzle is resistance to corruption. Now, everything is in place, and he must be able to do something about the mutant. The mutant is already running towards him, furious. Prota's shovel begins to glow, activating the force trace. He lunges forward, charging up a powerful attack and, with a blow to the mutant's chin, knocks him away. Prota thinks he might be able to defeat him. However, while the mutant is in the air, he turns into a ball full of thorns. Prota realizes that he's screwed, with a giant wheel of thorns heading his way, and asks himself, what the fuck? What's more, the creature hits a ramp and flies towards Prota, ready to fall on him. In desperation, Prota sees the creature fall so hard that it cracks the ground. The creature laughs in his face, but Prota comes out of the attack unscathed thanks to his resistance trait. He thinks, I didn't die, but it hurt a lot. Determined, he begins to punch the mutant, without giving it a chance to attack. However, Prota is hit by one of the mutant's thorns, followed by several others that pierce his body. He falls to the ground, full of wounds and thorns stuck to him, but he thinks, just a little more, and I'll be able to kill him. He sets off again, determined, but with the next attack, his arm simply explodes. His hand is all broken and missing fingers. Without mercy, the hedgehog blows his arm off, ready to finish him off right there. Prota thinks, that's to be expected from a Kim warrior. I'll never be able to kill this mutant. The mutant prepares a blow to finish Prota off. In the next scene, we see a flashback of him playing the game, and he reflects that, at the time, he was able to defeat all his enemies as Kim warrior. In fact, it was quite easy for him. All he had to do was click on the monsters and hope that his character would kill them. He never thought about how the character felt. He just pushed him to the limit, thinking that this would strengthen him in some way. Now, he feels what it's like to suffer with mediocre power. Back in battle, Prota punches the mutant in the face again, saying that there's no way he's giving up. We see that his arms are huge now because he's got a new trait, mutant muscle. The creature rolls away, and Prota realizes that this is why he received that attack so irresponsibly. Using the mana and strength traits, he managed to combine them to create this new trait, along with the thorns he put in its body. Now, he's ready for combat again. The mutant's thorns no longer penetrate Prota's skin, and he returns every attack with a punch. But the mutant puts several thorns in his hand and sinks Prota to the ground. Prota realizes that the creature is still not using its full strength, but even with his body all pierced, Prota begins to regenerate thanks to his new trait, Mutant Body. He is completely regenerated, brand new, and thanks the mutant for making him even more powerful. They begin to fight evenly, until the servant wakes up to all the noise. He comes across the scene of Prota, exchanging punches with the mutant and wonders, how is Warrior Kim doing this? Is he a superhuman? The servant sees Prota fighting on equal terms with a mutant, and, at one point, they are both thrown to opposite sides. Prota thinks it's not going to be that easy. Even with the same strength as the mutant, he's still at a disadvantage because he's smaller. The creature didn't seem to have given up yet either. Prota thinks that what he's going to do now is dangerous, but he has no other choice. He activates the contamination resistance trait, thinking he has to trust his instincts. He then deletes this trait, being completely taken over by the contamination and becoming a mutant, just like Hedgehog, but much more out of control. He prepares an attack of pure mana in the direction of the Hedgehog, as if it were a roar, a dragon's breath, and simply disintegrates the mutant's face. The beam is so powerful that it lights up the entire stadium. The servant, stunned, asks himself, what the hell is that? When Prota turns to him, the servant thinks that Prota has also turned into a monster, a mutant fighting another mutant. Is that really possible? He asks himself. Warrior Kim has obtained the mutant trait, and the servant realizes that he needs to get out of there immediately before he dies. When Prota spots him, he charges at him. The servant, thinking he was going to die, sees Prota de-transform right in front of him, and is shocked to realize that Prota is turning back into a human. Only Prota falls hard to the ground. He was just tired, not passed out or dead, and says, I've finally done it. Prota reflects that it was all very risky, as he deleted the last defense trait, which was resistance to contamination. It is explained that if you have the mutant form and mutant muscles without the resistance to contamination, you become a complete mutant. Common sense says that if you become a mutant, you can't go back to being human. But Prota knew very well what to do. Even in mutant form, he managed to reason that he needed to delete the trait immediately, while still being rational. He managed to delete the trait without too much trouble and regain his resistance to contamination. In the next scene, much later, we see that Prota is finished. He thinks that his muscles and bones have simply given up working, and that it will be a while before he gets back to work. We see that there was a strange item, a sphere of energy, in the dead mutant's mouth, and Prota collects it. It's a level 1 mana core. He's very happy to get it, saying it was worth the effort. He's there, all happy and celebrating, until the servant appears behind him, asking if he's all right. The The servant comments that Prota has become a mutant and asks what happened. Prota thinks that if this gets out and rumors are created about him, it won't be nice. He says he just made a bet and got very lucky. When the servant is about to say something, Prota interrupts him, handing him several zero-level mana cores. The staff are impressed by the amount of cores. He was actually giving them to them, and Prota says that everything was fine, that they just needed to stop and take a breather. Prota thinks that now that he's saved their lives and given them several mana cores, they'll surely keep the secret. We see that the servant was thinking exactly that. In the next scene, back at the office, we see the director all happy, talking to Prota. He says he heard that Prota had a hard time finishing the job, and Prota confirms it, but says that everything worked out in the end. He thinks, why is the director pulling my leg out of nowhere? The director soon reveals why. The people in the group told the director that Prota was a superhuman. Prota thinks, oh, so they think I'm a superhuman. It's explained that in Arcane Seoul, a superhuman is a person who awakens a powerful ability with very strong mana. In a world where strength is power, superhumans like these are basically nobodies. Prota reflects that it makes sense for them to think so, as only a superhuman could defeat a mutant in that situation. But, in fact, it was just his traits. The director says he's going to pay Prota right then and there. Prota thinks it's going to be great to leave everyone believing he's a superhuman. The director explains that the payment is for each dungeon cleared and for each creature faced, but because of the fees, Prota would keep 5 million. Only this time it will be different. He'll get a bonus, and in the end, he'll earn 20 million. Prota is delighted, saying that he will definitely continue working with the director. Apparently, being a superhuman is pretty cool. In the next scene, we see Prota thinking about how he's going to spend all this money. Then someone starts talking to him, saying that he seems to be in a very good mood, probably because he's received a big paycheck. Prota recognizes this person as one of his team members. The man says he's there for one reason, to see Prota and ask for a favor. He reveals that he is very ill and would like to borrow some money. He apologizes in advance for making this request, even though he has only worked with Prota once. Prota thinks it's not a good idea to help people he doesn't know in this world. Who's to say the guy won't betray him? It's hard enough dealing with yourself. Even so, Prota helps the man up, who was on his knees begging. He gives him some level 0 cores, thinking that he would feel bad if he ignored him. However, in the next scene, we see this same man laughing in Prota's face, with several cores in his hands, saying that this idiot has fallen right into their plan. The servant comments that Prota really seems immature in this kind of situation. The man who tricked Prota says it was easy. He said he was ill, that his son was ill too, or whatever. He says it's very annoying that Prota got paid better than they did. This is because the director gives part of the fees, and part of the fees he takes from the other members of the group to give to the superhuman. The servant comments that Prota isn't even a superhuman and that they should teach him a lesson. Then they start to come up with a plan to catch him, and the servant thinks that the little idiot must have a special hidden ability. But as soon as they find out what he's made of, they'll finish him off and show how scary this world can be. In the next scene, early in the morning, we see a very luxurious building. Prota is living the good life, getting a massage, and thinks that he would never have imagined being in such a place. It's much nicer here than in the game, obviously, but suddenly he feels a very strong pain. He thinks he's been resting in this hotel for 3 days, but his arm still hurts. Next time, he should think very carefully before using those mutant traits. He thought wrongly about this change of traits, thinking he could be invincible, but his body changes according to each trait, and depending on the trait, it can have very serious consequences and other much worse symptoms. The real problem is that he's reaching his limit by changing his lines so much. Then he looks out of the window and sees something very interesting. Apparently, there's the Fist of Steel gang, and just by looking at them, you can see their air of arrogance. It's explained that in Arcane Seoul, gangs rule the regions better than the law. That's only natural in a world where there are monsters, right? Prota says he's aware of this, not least because he wants to sell the core he's got, and shows her a level 2 core. The woman is impressed, even drooling at the sight of it, and Prota thinks it's good that she's surprised, because he's worked hard to finally get that core. He merged all the cores he had to create a level 2 core, and thinks that at the level it's at, he's going to get a lot of money. He sells it for 5 million. Taking advantage of this, Prota asks if they sell weapons and armor, and the woman says yes, and will take him to another room. Prota turns red at what she shows him, a huge room full of heavy equipment. He thinks that all the basic equipment in the game is there, in front of him, and tells himself that he's going to prepare very well now. In the next scene, we see his backpack full of rifles, and he comments that he's finally going to be able to play for real. Suddenly, someone stops him. It's a woman asking if he's a mercenary by any chance. He gets nervous and says no, but she shows him some money and tells him that the Fist of Steel gang has scared her a bit, and that he just needs to accompany her, that's all. Prota thinks, 500,000 just to accompany her? He reflects and thinks he should try, now that he has new equipment. Besides, he can't ignore a damsel in distress, can he? So he follows her. The girl leads him down a path that looks like a slum, and Prota begins to think she's taking him to a very dark place. Out of nowhere, she enters an alley, saying it's that way, and calls Prota to come in too. He replies that it's too dark and he can't see anything, but he was fooling her because he activated the night vision feature. He notices that she is already pointing a pistol at him. She comments that he's much more cautious than she expected, and Prota thinks she's armed, so it's a trap. Just then, the servant appears behind him and asks where the juvenile was going. The servant says it's good to see him again. Prota asks himself, what did I do to deserve this, huh? And the servant replies, nothing much. You were just stupid enough to fall into the trap. In the meantime, Prota runs off, leaving his equipment behind. However, the woman already shoots him, hitting him in the back, and it looks like the shot goes through his chest. The servant complains that she overreacted and should have shot him in the legs. She replies that it's better than letting him run around, isn't it? The servant then comments that it looks like he's dead, and says that since Prota became a mutant and then turned back into a human, his body must be worth quite a lot. Obviously, it would be worth more if he was captured alive, but at least they can get the equipment he left behind. Suddenly, they realize that Prota's body has simply disappeared. Everyone wonders, where's the dead guy? Just then, one of the poaches explodes, and the first one takes a beating. Everyone is left in complete darkness, unable to understand what is happening. The servant can't believe that Prota is still alive, but Prota replies, yes, I certainly am. I'm not going to die for these people. We then have a flashback of Prota buying a bulletproof vest. He thinks, I'm not going to die that easily. Thanks to this, he has obtained a very important trait, and the system warns him that he has obtained the play dead trait. The people become desperate, looking for him, and Prota scares the servant, asking him if he was looking for him. Prota remembers that he once saved Servo's life and says, then I'll take it now. He punches the servant in the face and he rolls down the stairs. The servant gets up and tries to kick Prota, who dodges easily. Prota comments that Servo doesn't seem very grateful to have been saved and punches him again, with no time to react. Just as he's about to step on the servant's head, the woman shoots him again, only she literally shot herself in the dark because she couldn't see a thing. She asks if the servant is all right, and Prota begins to reflect that he was very careless. The biggest danger in Arcane Seoul isn't the monsters or mutants, it's the people. He was too naive to trust people so easily. So he decides he won't make the same mistake again. He pulls out his pistol and shoots her in the arm, dropping his gun. He then shoots the other guy in front of him in the shoulder, with both of them unable to engage in combat again. Prota says that's enough. But just as he thinks about killing the servant, the latter is already attacking Prota. He can't react very well and is disarmed by the servant. Prota notices that Servo's legs have transformed. He is now in his level 1 superhuman form. Prota thinks that this was the worst moment for him to transform into a superhuman, and that the game was trolling him again. Prota remembers this function in the game, the awakening of the superhuman. All the playable characters in the game can undergo this transformation. In short, it's the basic game evolution system. Technically, a level 1 superhuman is more powerful than a normal person holding an automatic rifle. In other words, he would now have to deal with a superhuman, while he himself hadn't even awakened yet. The servant was so fast that it disappeared, and Prota began to despair. We see that the servant was activating his new traits, kick and stereoscopic movement. The stereoscopic movement gave him high elasticity and flexibility, allowing him to walk through walls. Prota realizes that Servo has used that trait to climb the wall. The servant then goes after Prota with all his might, trying to kill him for good. Luckily, Prota manages to dodge this very powerful attack. The servant wonders how he managed to dodge, but says that Prota won't escape the next attack. He hits Prota and starts laughing, thinking he's already killed him. But Prota says he had no intention of dodging this time, because the servant was just a dumb little animal. Prota thinks that buying that expandable baton was certainly a good idea. In the next scene, we see a flashback to when Prota was in that weapons store. He ponders whether it's really worth buying a gun, and it's explained that Kim belongs to the warrior class, so he's not very effective at using firearms. Instead, he specializes in melee weapons such as swords and shields. That's why Prota bought the expandable baton. He thinks that each class has a weapon that is most effective in the hands of its users, so if he wants to beat the servant, he'll have to fight hand hand to hand. He expands the staff and says he'll have to settle this in a fight, up close. He lands a blow on the servant, knocking him to the ground. The system tells him that he has achieved the hit trait. Prota thinks he has finally achieved his first-class specific trait, the warrior's specialty, hit. At this point, the Prota begins to perform a combo of blows on the servant, with different directions and abilities. The servant, seeing a gap, tries to attack him with a kick. Prota thinks he's left an opening, but he can't stop now that he's come this far. Even if he breaks in one piece, he'll keep hitting. He hits the servant's thigh, but his arm is almost fractured by the impact of the kick. Even so, the servant has also suffered a great deal of damage to his leg. Then, Prota's staff begins to glow, and the system tells him that he has achieved another trait, the combo trait. Prota thinks he has finally obtained the best traits for a melee combatant, hit and combo. He starts machine gunning the servant with blows, who was already asking Prota to please stop, but he wouldn't. Prota hits the servant in the stomach, who spits, blurs his vision, and falls hard to the ground. The Prota shouts, saying that he has finally managed to defeat an awakened one, but suddenly his hand begins to redden, and he feels something very strange. Flames begin to travel through his body, causing intense pain. He feels as if something is coming out of him. Prota thinks the time has come. Just then, a huge explosion occurs, and he remembers that day, that cruel day, when he discovered the truth about Arcane Seoul. The system warns him that he has awakened. Now, the warrior Kim is a superhuman. Prota realizes that, at last, he is a superhuman. He shouts, almost getting down on his knees to thank God. Overjoyed, he begins to break dance, celebrating the fact that he's now going to receive million-dollar offers. But behind him, someone says, "He's finally finished, huh?" When Prota, upside down in the middle of the break, turns around, he sees the guys from the Fist of Steel gang. He thinks they belong to the second category of characters given to Arcane Seoul players. These are characters who are basically reinforced soldiers, and firearms are their main tools. They specialize in shooting with their prosthetic arms. But the big problem at the time was that the Steel Fist led the Steel Fist gang, and Prota thinks he's on their turf. They're probably very provoked at the moment. The Steel Fist asks him if he checked where he was before making this mess, and puts a bazooka to Kim's chest. He says that he was suddenly attacked and that it was self-defense, that he just didn't want to die. Then the Steel Fist grabs a pistol and says, "Oh, so you think these guys here are scarier than us?" Prota thinks that if he fights a firearm in the state he's in now, it's going to be a lot of trouble. The Steel Fist puts the gun right to his chest and says, "You've made a very bad decision now. This is what happens when someone makes a mess of my territory." Prota doesn't seem to react much to this, until he says, "So, if that's the case, it looks like I made a mistake." He grabs the Steel Fist's gun and says, "I'm not the type to die easily. No." Prota himself shoots him in the chest. The bullet obviously goes through. The Steel Fist thinks he pulled the trigger himself. This guy is crazy, but Prota was still breathing, and everyone is shocked. That's because the system warns him that he has a new trait, regeneration. The Steel Fist comments, "Look, you seem to have an interesting ability." Prota thinks he has evolved his wound recovery trait into regeneration, and this trait is at the level of a superhuman. Prota decides that he shouldn't be underestimated and decides to use the tactic of bluffing. He points at the bodies and says that he didn't survive by luck. "I'm not here to play games. I'm the warrior Kim." The Steel Fist asks, "Ah, Warrior Kim, is that your name?" He says he really liked Prota and says he'll let it slide this time, but Prota will owe him one. The Steel Fist puts his hand on Prota's shoulder and says, "I'm sure you know what that means, don't you?" Prota replies, "Yes, I'll remember that." Then the Steel Fist goes to shake his hand and says that one day they will work together in some business. Prota thinks that Steel Fist isn't the type to betray people and that it wouldn't be a bad idea to make a connection like that. He replies that it sounds like a very good proposal and shakes Steel Fist's hand. The next scene is in Janil, in the Tower of the Superhumans. Prota is there in a Hawaiian outfit and sunglasses, and comments that he's seen this place in the game, but that in real life it's very spectacular. We see a beautiful place, full of staircases, everything very shiny and bright. He comments that it's completely different from a game screen. Then, a woman welcomes him to the Tower of Superhumans and asks if she can help him. Prota is embarrassed, as she is very beautiful, and he wonders if she really is an NPC, as she looks very familiar. She asks him if he's there to get his superhuman certification, and tells him that he needs to go to a machine to measure his mana. Prota thinks that the receptionist was very attentive, initiative, as he didn't even have to ask, and she already guided him. He thinks that once he gets his superhuman certification, he'll finally be able to start his real life. Then he feels a very strange tremor, and the people around him start saying that the saint is here. Prota asks himself, "Wait a minute, Santa." We then see a ship with an extremely strong glow. A pillar of light begins to form there, while the people around pray. When Prota realizes who it is, he is shocked. That's the order of the Ancient Father. He wonders what this game boss is doing there. Prota remembers that, as he's still in the game's tutorial, this character hasn't become a boss yet. But as the story progresses, it's discovered that this order is actually a cult, and they start attacking citizens indiscriminately. The faithful are impressed that the saint is going to measure their mana. When she does this, the circuits go crazy. Her power is such that it starts exploding around everyone. Prota thinks it's really loud. When it's all over, there's a hush as everyone is impressed. The saint is level 27, a priestess with mana level 8, who has gone through 6 layers of circuitry. Everyone is impressed by this, but Prota isn't excited at all. Quite the opposite. It's said that a level 8 superhuman is equivalent to an entire Air Force squadron. She's literally a national level superhuman, someone with enough power to kill everyone there. But even if Prota starts warning people about this now, he'll be treated like a nutter because she's a saint. So he decides to just measure his mana and try to stay out of that woman's attention. But as soon as he thinks about it, the woman glances at him. What is she looking at? He asks himself. She says that there seems to be a very unusual individual there. She appears right next to Prota and comments that he has a very intriguing ability. He is startled and exclaims, "Shit, you scared the shit out of me." Prota thinks he's done for, as she seems to have sensed that he's changed his features. And that's it, folks. I hope you enjoyed it. This book has just been released, so the video was short. But subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and I'll see you next time. Speak.